This is Sean Stevenson from the SeanStevensonModel.com, and you're listening to Justin and Kate at Extreme Health Radio, bringing cutting-edge fitness and nutrition information right into your eardrums. So buckle your seatbelts and listen in.
Welcome to Extreme Health Radio. Extreme Health Radio.
Where natural solutions to almost every health condition are out there. Join us on our journey to find them.
Now here are your hosts,
broadcasting from sunny Southern California around the world,
Justin and Kate Stellman.
Oh my gosh, I forgot it was going to make that noise, that little thing there.
I heard a gong.
Did you hear that?
What was that? What was that?
Oh my gosh. I have this little thing that I have that it tells me, still laughing about it because it made it on the air, but it tells me I have it set for every 20 minutes, and it's a countdown timer. So it tells me at the end of 20 minutes to raise my standing desk.
Oh, so you're not sitting for too long.
Yeah, because I'm trying to time myself. Because I've heard you don't want to sit for longer than 6 hours in a day.
Right.
And no longer than 20 minutes each time. So I have this little gong. So if you guys hear a gong,
go off.
Go off.
It sounded like I was in some sort of like temple.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a...
That was great. I love it.
Oh my gosh. All right, with that out of the way, I want to thank you guys all for joining us. This is Justin from Extreme Health Radio, and that voice you heard was...
Kate, your sidekick.
My sidekick?
Some days.
/wife.
/wife, /note taker.
/note taker.
/food preparer.
It's the Slashy Awards.
Slashy Awards.
And this is Extreme Health Radio. This is episode... What episode is this?
153.
153, and we are in, let's see, Wednesday, September 25th, 2013.
I know, crazy, right?
Crazy. Time is flying by. And if you'd like to follow us on Facebook, please feel free to do so. Join our community. We'd love to have you do that. It'd be an amazing thing to have you a part of that and stay up to date with our shows and different information we post and all of that. And if you'd like to support us on Amazon this holiday season or anytime you make a purchase on Amazon, we'd love to have you support us. It'd be great. And you can just go to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon, and you can just make your purchases. Doesn't have to be health related, and there you go.
You could buy a gong.
You could buy a gong.
It's true. You could buy anything you want.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be cool. I like the sound of it.
That's funny. So today we've got a really great guest. Again, this is, I think, the fourth installment of our 4-part series with Mr. Daniel Vitalis. And he is an amazing guy. And he's got a website called SirThrival.com, if you haven't heard. And his own website where he kind of blogs and does his writings is DanielVitalis.com. And he goes around the world and does lectures and teaches people, and just an amazing guy. And today we're going to be talking about the fourth noble element, which is fire. So welcome, Daniel. Thanks for joining us today. How you doing?
Yeah, it's good to be back. So it's like the alpha and omega. We've kind of come through this process doing these interviews, and we've come to the sort of final part. And really excited to share information about the element of fire today. I
love it. And speaking of fire, are you going to be making your yearly pilgrimage this coming up winter to Arizona?
You know, I'm in decision mode about that right now. I was just getting cleaned up and showered and ready for this interview, and I was thinking about the hot springs there that I visit, and thinking, yeah, it's time to book some tickets.
Yeah, the water's getting a little cold, so you're thinking,
yeah, it's getting a little chilly up this way already. A little dark, too.
Is that right?
And actually a really timely part for the conversation, because, you know, I call this element fire, but, you know, when it comes to our health, what I'm really talking about is the fire of the sun, or the light of the sun. And, you know, we are headed, this is a timely conversation because we're headed in the northern hemisphere into winter, and it's time for us to really start thinking about our light exposure and our sun exposure and our vitamin D levels and all these things, because they're so much more important than we often think about. And so for those of us who have the, I guess the luxury, but really who've created the opportunity to go away for the winter, or for people like you guys who live in a place that's just sort of perpetually sunny, we're really blessed because we're able to, you know, maintain those vitamin D levels throughout the winter. For a lot of people, they're headed into a deep deficiency. and that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways, of course, they call being really sad, or they call seasonal affective disorder,
that's right.
which is, a truly a deficiency of a critical nutrient. But in this case, that nutrient is a form of energy called ultraviolet light.
How prevalent do you think it is, that seasonal affectiveness disorder? Is it pretty prevalent?
I think it's extremely prevalent, but the numbers are a little wishy-washy, and we're still getting clear on how prevalent vitamin D deficiency is. But I think that we could say that, my guess would be if we really got down to blood tests of everybody in our population, we'd see it be, 90%, I bet, would have vitamin D deficiencies. But it's high. It's more than half.
Well, because I take for granted that we live down here in Southern California, but because I'm just thinking of Seattle and the fact that they have the highest suicide rate and all of that, right?
It's interesting with them, too, because if you look at the UV exposure maps for the country, there's a really strong correlation between breast cancer and sunlight as well. And we see that the places like where I live in Maine, a much higher rate than where you are in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And we see that band of UV light, or that light, I guess, deficiency tips up into the Seattle area, where there's also a really high prevalence of breast cancer. And it seems to, in part, be related to deficiencies of enough UVB to produce the vitamin D people need.
Wow, that's interesting. So,
if you lived anywhere but here, Jay, you'd be toast.
I would be.
You're affected. There's one cloudy day out of like a month, and he goes into this like downward spiral. I'm not kidding. It's bad.
It's not good.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that is. Do you think that's just a vitamin D deficiency thing that I've got going on, even though I live here? Or
well, there's more to it. We're going to get more deeply into it, of course, as the call goes on. But there are crucial neurotransmitters whose production is dependent upon your exposure to sunlight, and namely serotonin and a more advanced form of melatonin. They're sort of precursor. Serotonin's a precursor of melatonin, but both of those neurotransmitters, their production and regulation is dependent on our exposure to sunlight. And serotonin, I think most of us have heard by now, is truly critical to good mood, and melatonin critical to good quality sleep and rest. And when we're not getting enough sunlight, the production of those things is affected, and so our moods are affected. So it is vitamin D, but it's also other things as well. And my guess is, we'll stick to the science today, and maybe we'll touch on a little mysticism, but we'll mostly stick to the facts of science, right? That science is established right now. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things we all can see when we look at the world of science is that constantly new things are being discovered, and almost always they're validating old beliefs. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of it is serotonin, part of it's vitamin D, and then a lot of it probably goes into even more spiritual territory. And those things, like I said, I think energetically, those things will be validated as science moves forward.
So serotonin, you said, is a precursor to melatonin. Is that right?
Yeah, they're crucial for, serotonin's crucial for the production of melatonin. And we, our bodies, and, these two molecules, they regulate what we call our circadian rhythm. And so that's sort of our diurnal sleep-wake cycle. Uh-huh. And it is regulated by sunlight. And so, really what I guess, to really introduce today's interview, what I want to say is that we are, according to the current, numbers given to us, by, again, they're sort of the men in the white coats, the scientists. They tell us that our species is 200,000 years old in its modern form. But of course, our hominid lineage goes back millions of years. And all of those years, up until, can you imagine this? Really up until just recently, maybe 100 years ago, that entire history was lived in the presence of sunlight. It was lived out in the sunlight. Never before has this happened where people have been this cut off. Now, about 6,000 years ago, we really got into this thing called, civilization or city building. Mm-hmm. And of course, cities are like an artificial canyon, right? So if you live in a city, a walled city or a city with large, buildings, it's sort of like being in a canyon. And of course, people start getting cut off from sunlight. Mm-hmm. And that's a new phenomena. But still, very few people relative to the Earth's population did that until very recently. Now we've just crossed the threshold where more people live in cities than live in the country. And this is unprecedented, right? This is bold new territory. And so for the first time, we're seeing most of the population living in these artificial canyons cut off from sufficient sunlight. So it's sort of something it's been a domino effect, but it's been more of I guess it's been a parabolic curve. People are it's been accelerated how deficient people are in, receiving the UV that they need. So but the point is, as an animal, we've lived our entire existence in the presence of sun. And I think if we were going to say, if we were going to really get down to it, what is so unique and different about Homo sapiens? Why are we different? I mean, there's lots of people who've given lots of sort of explanations, like we're different because we are conscious of ourselves, or we're different because we have opposable thumbs, or we're different because we are tool makers. But in my opinion, what really differentiates and separates our type of, monkey, I guess you could say, our type of primate, our species from every other animal on the planet, is that we've harnessed fire. That is truly the unique thing. I mean, we see that some of our primate and our relatives do make rudimentary tools. That's not unique to us. Tool use is not unique to human beings, but fire use.
Interesting. Okay.
That's unique. And we've been doing that for, it looks like we've been making fire since before we were in our modern form, which means before Homo sapiens, picture ourselves, and then there was a creature before us, similar to us, but much more of a proto form. Homo habilis looks like he made fire. So it looks like there was never a time where human beings learned to make fire. We actually have been making fire since we first existed, and that's important to understand. Wow. We've been cooking and we've been producing tools with fire since the very first human being. So the first human being already knew how to make fire, if that makes sense. There was never a sort of discovery of fire for our species, because the species before us had discovered it.
That's crazy, because I've heard that book too. They talk about, I've never read it. It's something about how cooking made us human, and the fact that we ate cooked food has something to do with our brains enlarging and all of that. Have you heard about that book?
Yeah, that book, Catching Fire, is really important, I think, for people who are interested in this idea to read, because really what it explores is how archaeologists digging back through time, through layers of strata of the earth, they find these hearths where our ancestors were producing fire. And the further they go back, expecting to sort of, I guess, you can imagine originally expecting to sort of figure out when we discovered fire. Mm-hmm. But then instead what they find out is, hey, wait a second, we didn't discover fire. Another species discovered fire and passed that technology to us.
Really?
And that's a very powerful shift in thinking.
So what does that mean?
You could imagine a sort of Garden of Eden scenario where human beings just sort of live like all the other animals, but that actually never happened. We've been a sort of slightly unnatural organism since the very beginning, inception of our species.
So how did that work? Some other species existed and then taught us how to use fire? Is that kind of how...
Well, or it'd be probably more appropriate to say another species knew how to use fire, and over time that species became us.
Wow.
If that makes more sense. And we would recognize, if we were to go back 200,000 years and we were to take a human from that time, the earliest humans, and we were to put modern clothes on them and walk them down the streets where you live, you would not notice them as different. They are anatomically the same as you. You'd think, wow, that guy's a badass, or wow, that woman's gorgeous, because they would have a physique that would be far more robust than ours as far as their musculature. I'm sure that their teeth would look a lot nicer. Their skulls would be formed very well. So they would look like really healthy people, but they would be the same body as us. But if we were to take a Homo habilis, now you would be like, whoa, ape man, that's not a human, that's something else. Yeah. What is that? And those are the ones who eventually became us, essentially.
It's like the Geico commercial kind of guy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So easy a caveman can do it. And, interestingly, if you go out into the woods and try to make fire without matches or a lighter, you'll see, wow, it's not that so easy a caveman could do it. Actually very complex and requires some understanding of physics. And so I think one point I want to make here is that what is fire? We talked in the last installment where we talked about air, we talked about fire being oxidation, and we talked a lot about the blood and sort of rusting and burning and oxidation. And today what I want to say about fire is that in addition to oxidation, you could almost think of fire as being stored sunlight. So let's imagine a plant like a tree. What it's doing is it's photosynthesizing. So it's taking sunlight and it's building these complex sugars called cellulose. Another name for cellulose is wood. So a plant is basically building wood out of what's in the soil, what's in the air, and combining that with the energy of sunlight. And what it's doing is storing the sunlight in its sugars or in its wood. When we burn that wood, we're basically releasing the heat and the light that's been stored in there from sunlight, if that makes sense.
Wow. So
fire is essentially stored sunlight. When we burn anything, we're basically releasing that sunlight energy back. So, this whole thing, the whole planet is basically fueled by sunlight. And our whole evolutionary history is taking place in the presence of sunlight. And when we think about the sun, I guess it's easy to forget almost for a minute that what the sun is. Like, it's a star. And we live, and here's maybe a new way of thinking about the star that we often think we live next to. But something I'd like to sort of drop into the minds of the listener here is that I think it's really more appropriate to say we live inside of the sun. And the reason is the sun is made up of various layers, starting at its core and spreading out. We see its photosphere and then eventually what we call the heliosphere. And the heliosphere is a gigantic electromagnetic field that emanates from the sun. In our entire solar system, the Earth included, is actually inside the heliosphere. So essentially, we live inside of a layer of the sun, its most diffuse layer.
Wow.
We actually are inside the sun, if that makes sense. So it's a very diffuse layer. It's a very energetic layer made up of electromagnetically charged particles. And our planet is literally embedded in that. So for our entire existence, we've been receiving that light directly onto our bodies, and we've been producing chemicals as a result. Essentially, it's like a required nutrient, this light from the sun. And we produce chemicals that when we're not in the sunlight, we don't produce, and our health begins to degrade really rapidly. So as I've mentioned in the past, but I'll reiterate here, we have more nutritional needs than just food. Food is where we get some of our nutrients, but we also get, a critical nutrient, H2O hydration from drinking water. We also get critical nutrients like oxygen from breathing air. And there are critical nutrients in the electromagnetic spectrum that emanates from the sun, primarily ultraviolet B radiation, which we require. We can't live without ultraviolet radiation. We need it. Right. And there's been a movement towards blocking ourselves from the sun, covering ourselves from the sun, putting on chemicals that absorb that UVB so that it doesn't get into our skin. And there's like a phobia that's spread around the world that the sun is dangerous for us. And I think it just shows the lack of common sense, because it's like, hey, if we step back and just think about this for a second, 200,000 years in sunlight, what changed with the sun that all of a sudden it was bad for us?
Right.
Because we don't have a long history of skin cancer. That's a relatively new phenomena in its current form. So,
well, wouldn't the doctors say that what changed would be the alleged fact that we're destroying our ozone layers and all that?
That doesn't really hold water for very long. I mean, really, the ozone layer issue really only is in part of the planet, and that's actually not where we're seeing the increase in cancers. Mostly where we're seeing skin cancer is in places where people get the least sunlight. So that's a really important distinction here.
I think the average person buys into that theory, though.
Yeah,
because nobody really pays attention to what's really going on.
Yeah.
And the thing is it's not completely false, right? It's based in some fact. So here's the thing about sunlight. Sunlight has some incredibly beneficial effects, and it does have some deleterious effects. There are some negative effects to sunlight. I mean, there's no question that sunlight ages the skin, right? We can see that in people who've had excessive sun exposure their whole life. We can see that it wrinkles the skin, it damages the skin. There's no question that unprotected skin can develop skin cancers. Now, there's an interesting thing here. The World Health Organization did a study. It's called the Global Burden of Disease Due to Ultraviolet Radiation. Uh-huh. And in that, what they explored was how serious is this issue worldwide of cancers and other health conditions that are created by ultraviolet radiation. And what they found was, and these numbers are based on, they modulate these numbers by introducing the idea that some people, maybe it's not just death, but it's also disability. So we're looking at the problems of death, but also disease too, combined. So those are called disability adjusted life years. And what they found is that only 0.1% of the world's disease burden is a result of ultraviolet light. So
really,
what they uncovered was that a statistically almost non-existent problem with, death and disease due to ultraviolet light. And what this reveals is that actually what we need to look at is how serious are the effects of not getting sunlight. And when we look at that, what we see is like a tremendous increase in...
I'm so sorry about that, Daniel. That was my little program. I couldn't
to stand up.
Oh my gosh, time to stand up.
I'll turn that off for the rest. I'm so sorry.
Little metronome in the background. All right, so I guess really the thing is that what they found was that when we don't get enough UV, actually the disease burden for the world goes up much more. So we see problems with breast cancer. We see problems with lung cancer. We see problems with colon cancer. We see problems with prostate cancer that arise when we don't get enough UV. So really what I think the world's realizing now is that it's actually more important that people get sunlight than that they try to constantly protect themselves from sunlight, because the negative effects of not getting sunlight far outweigh any negative effects caused by excessive UV, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's a much bigger problem not to get sunlight. And worldwide, that lack of sunlight that people are receiving is causing a huge disease burden for the planet right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we got to take a break right now, but I see people around our town all the time. I mean, when we go walking, Kate, we'll see ladies all completely covered up, and they'll have gloves, umbrellas, and it's just amazing. Yeah,
it's seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Strangest thing. Why would you be in Southern California if you're gonna walk around with a parasol?
Yeah, it's really wild. And I also heard of a study they were doing in Australia, and I think it was something to the effect of, I forget what the actual numbers were, but the overall point of the study was that the people that had the highest incidence of skin cancer were people that, like office workers, who had less than, I think, 5 hours of sun exposure a week or something like that. And so all of that supports everything you're saying, Daniel.
Yeah, and we'll flesh that out a little bit more after your break.
Excellent. All right, we're with Daniel Vitalis, and I hope you're enjoying the interview. And we're going to be right back with Daniel Vitalis from danielvitalis.com and sirthrival.com right after this short break. So there's no real way to avoid toxins or chemicals in our daily life. It seems like we're exposed to them no matter what we do in our lives, from paint fumes to mercury fillings, coal-fired plants, perfumes, soaps, off-gassing of carpets in our houses, and genetically modified foods, and foods that are sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, the xenoestrogens in plastics and car exhaust, secondhand smoke, even your dry cleaning and laundry detergents, even your mattresses have chemicals inside them that outgas. So getting these toxins and chemicals and poisons out of your bloodstream and out of your fat cells is going to be really critical moving forward in our society, because it seems like every year there's more and more chemicals that keep becoming introduced with new products in the market. So I would consider getting one of these far infrared saunas. We've got a great sauna developed by Phil Wilson, and I've known about his work for many, many years, and I'm so proud to be offering his sauna on our website. And he's been in this business since 1975. And the sauna is really great because it slows the aging process. It helps with weight loss and burning calories. I think you can burn like 600 calories in 15 or 20 minutes, and it helps to cleanse the skin. It improves your sleep and helps to prevent illnesses like flus and colds, as well as energizing the body. And it's great for improving blood circulation and promoting cellular renewal, as well as increasing metabolism and inducing profuse sweating. And it's really, really great. And And the great thing is, too, is you don't produce any lactic acid. So you can sweat without producing any of this lactic acid that you would normally produce if you lifted weights or went for a big long run. So if you're interested in this, you can check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna. It's great because it sets up in about 2 to 5 minutes, and it's portable, and it's super easy to clean. It's got low electromagnetic field radiation coming off of it, and it produces energy and heat inside the sauna evenly. It's great machine. So if you're interested in sweating like this for only 15 minutes a day, it's great. It requires 0 preheating. It's got a 1-year warranty. And Phil Wilson is a great guy. We're so proud to be offering his saunas on our website. So if you're interested, check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna. Or you could check it out in our store, and it's $990 plus $25 shipping. And that's really a good deal because many of the saunas out there, you can check them out. They're in the thousands of dollars, $2,000 to $4,000. So this is great. You can buy it through PayPal. You don't even need a PayPal account. It's 100% secure. So consider doing this if you're interested in living a long, healthy, disease-free life. So check it out, extremehealthradio.com/sauna.
100% listener supported. Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Don't forget to join our thriving community for health tips, inspiration, and show updates at extremehealthradio.com/Facebook.
All right, we're having a great time here with Daniel Vitalis from surthrival.com and danielvitalis.com as well. And hopefully you are enjoying the interview. And I just wanted to apologize for those sounds during the show. I have turned that program off, and I'm just going to sit and be happy with sitting. I think
I'm just going to focus on sitting today during this interview.
Yeah, that's the moral of the story. So also, don't forget to check out that sauna, too. We should ask Daniel about that, about the far infrared light and if that has any relation to the sun and the energy and that kind of thing. But don't forget to check out that sauna. It's really an amazing thing, and we use ours every single day.
We actually do.
Yeah, we actually do.
Thing.
30 minutes a day for me. And, good stuff. So, and also, if you would like to follow us on Facebook and join our community, we'd love to have you join. All you got to do is go to extremehealthradio.com/like and click the like button on there, and you'll be ready to go. And so, Daniel, I wanted to ask you really quickly, is there anything to the far infrared light on the sauna there that I was
you know what? I'm going to actually come back to that in a little bit because, and I'm really glad to have heard that ad that you guys ran because it's a critical part to this discussion of fire. So, you know, for the listeners who followed this whole interview series, you'll remember that when we talked about Earth, we talked about the earth that goes in. That's the stuff we need to eat. And then we talked about what comes back out because the body both needs nutrition and it needs to eliminate. Mm-hmm. We talked about water kind of going in and then water coming back out as our urine. We talked about inhaling and when we inspire air and then we exhale back out the waste material. Well, we also are going to talk today about absorbing this fire from the sun, but also eliminating through the skin. Okay. You know, so we have 4 organs of elimination. And there's one that I relate to each element. So when we talk about the elimination of solid waste, we talk about the colon. When we talk about eliminating water waste, we talk about the kidneys. When we talk about eliminating gaseous waste, we talk about the lungs. And when we talk about eliminating that heat energy or the sort of fire energy, that's coming out through the skin. So the same organ that absorbs this light from the sun is the same organ that eliminates heat and excess heat via sweating. And the sauna is a crucial piece of the puzzle there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So where were we before the break? I forget where we were.
You know, I do too, but what we were saying was essentially that that the World Health Organization has recognized that the issue, the problems with not getting enough sun far outweigh the problems of getting too much sun. So in, you know, that classic pendulum effect, we went a little too far into this protect yourself from the sun. And I think where we were at is you guys were talking about people wearing parasols and umbrellas, where you live, trying to protect themselves from the sun. I was thinking about being down by the equator a couple years ago in Ecuador, and I saw some Japanese women who were wearing face shields. It was like a sunglass lens, but the size of a welder's mask. Wow. That they wore to completely shield their faces. And,
that's incredible.
It's interesting because, I know people do have concerns about aging their skin. However, I'm not suggesting people need to lay out all day in the sun. What we need to do is take a gauge, basically, of how dark our skin is and then determine our sun exposure needs based on that. So here's the thing. We just talked about 200,000 years of adaptation to living in the light of the sun. And over time, as people spread around the globe, and some people went to the more extreme latitudes and some people stayed closer to the equator, our skin sort of differentiated. It's likely that the first human beings had very darkly pigmented skin, like the skin colors that we see that come out of that come from people with African origins. That's likely the original skin coloration. And as people headed more north, of course, their skin lightened. They produced less melanin. Now, here's how I want people to think of melanin. Melanin is the pigment, by the way, that's in your skin that gives you a tan. Or if you're somebody with dark skin, that's where the color of your skin's coming from. It's coming from this pigment called melanin. Now, when people use sunscreen, what they're doing is